Wow, what an exciting day was it. Hello everyone, thank you for having me. My name is Sia, and I will be talking about, as you see, culturalization. So Davron presented us with a great framework to organize processes. I will be talking more about the places from where you can take your hypothesis on what you can base your culturalization. So yeah, my name is Sia. I've been working as ASO specialist for 5 years now, and I've been doing some kind of communication, marketing, or cultural research for free educations. And the interesting thing I found out is that in the big marketing, in the place where they sell physical products, they've been doing some kind of cultural research on adaptation to different countries for almost 50 years. And there are a lot of things which we can take from there in our day-to-day digital job. So culturalization, to give you an example why it can be important, I would like to ask you a question. Please raise your hand if you have ever used the same screenshots for your English-speaking localizations. United States, Canada, Australia, India. Yeah, I did too. And you might have noticed that results were not quite the same. And those numbers, by the way, are the most trusted number as per Max's talk earlier from Google Play Console. And those differences, they make sense if you think about it. I mean, Australia is literally on the other part of the planet. Why would we expect people from there to react, to be exactly like people who live in the United States, Canada, or whatnot? And the answer to that is the internet. Thanks to the internet, we believe that users now can read the same news, and we don't believe that's actually true. So users now can read the same news, watch the same content, use the same apps. And it led us to a belief that thanks to that, they started to share also their pains, their needs, their desires, their values. However, if you ever learned a foreign language, you might have noticed that the direct translation does not actually explain the true meaning of a word in foreign language. You only can know it if you kind of live the language, if you know the context. And that's exactly what's happening when we're trying to translate our message, our main selling points to other cultures. To give you an example, I would like to take one value which is very universal. It's family. I mean, everyone has families, right? And everyone agrees that it's important no matter from which part of the world do you come. However, the picture of said family, which is presented in the media, would differ from culture to culture. All those small implications, the way the relationships are built, all those important things which actually make the difference, they're not the same. And you may ask, why do we care? Oh, they're different, okay. But it actually can influence our CR, our installs, because the people from the target country will just not understand the message you're trying to convey. And that's exactly what happened in a case of Lego, which is a building block company, the toys for children. And they were not, at some point, they were not selling as well in France as they did in Denmark. And why did that happen? Because the main message of the marketing campaigns, which were used by Lego in Denmark, was build houses with your kids. And French people just weren't buying it as much as people in Denmark. And the reason for that is different power distance. Power distance is one of 6 Hofstede dimensions of his cultural dimensions model. Each dimension has 2 sets of values placed on the different ends of the dimension. The first one, and those sets of values are opposite. All the cultures are measured and placed in relation to each other, closer to the one end or to the other one. And for example, continuing talking about power dimensions, if we take Denmark, which has a really low power distance index, people there, the people of authority there, are really accessible. it's possible to meet some politician, to see them taking public transport or something. However, in France, which has much higher power distance index, contrary to what you might have thought about the social country, there is a thing that people in France expect to be respected just based on their status. That is how society is built. And figures of authority, such as managers, teachers, and yes, parents, are less accessible. As a result, the idea, which was really easy to understand to people from Denmark, that you can come down to a child as your figure of authority, you're coming down to their level and you're playing with them, you're building houses. In France, it just wasn't very attractive. So, which led to a fact that the marketing campaign just wasn't working. Obviously, there are cultures with a much higher power distance. And that is how a dimension works when you have countries placed in relations to each other. To give you an example of how you can use this information to improve your ASO campaign, ASO, your communication and stuff, I would like to take the other dimension, which is culturalistic, individualistic one. When talking about that, we are measuring how the society approaches the concept of self, conformism, and relations between the members of said society. And all that, obviously, influences the way we create our communication, our messaging. For example, when writing a slogan, the people from collectivistic societies, and mind you, this is a translation, prefer to use the words which address the group as a whole, or a group pronouns. The whole world is watching, or we win together, and so on. As opposite to individualistic countries, where the majority of slogans are dominated by personal pronouns as treat yourself or I can do it. The other thing which differs those two types of countries is the way they present people in their visuals. Collectivistic countries generally take better than there are more people on the screenshots, on any visual communication, obviously. Because if the person is alone, then that might be a negative connotation, that something is not quite right with him. Does he have no friends? What's wrong? Well, people from individualistic cultures, they do not care. I mean, depending on context, if the person is alone, that's fine. If they are not alone, that's also okay. Finally, claims we make in our screenshots. Collectivistic cultures are more sensitive to our social proof claims because they want to know that the members of their group accept this product. They like it, they use it, and therefore they read the reviews and they pay attention to that. As compared to individualistic cultures, which are more, members of them are more interested to see how this particular product can benefit themselves. And preferably, this information should be expressed in hard numbers and be measured. About those high numbers, the other way those cultures differ between themselves is their mode of communication. The high context cultures, which are generally collectivistic, they communicate in an indirect way. They use heavily the gestures, the postures, the symbols, and so on. While to convey all the hidden messages their communication might have, while individualistic cultures are generally low-context cultures, and they use more the verbal communication, the textual communication, really clear, really spoken out loud, and so on, with less hidden meanings. And that is how it can influence the things which we, all of us, I imagine, work almost every day or every day. The high context cultures generally prefer the more colorful communication with the dramatic angles and stuff, so something which has hidden meanings because they're used to look for them, they're used to decipher them. While low context cultures would go more often for a cleaner design, easy to understand call to actions, which are easy to read or easy to find on a text, and as you can see in this example, more text which explains the main idea. So, the Hofstede model, which I was talking before, is the one which is used the most often for the purposes of marketing. But obviously, after the 50 years of research, this is not the only one. This model can be used mostly for long or longish texts. And what it's based on is different types of education styles, different types of thinking, which each country prefers. Let's take a closer look at each one of them. So, Saxonic intellectual style shows a preference of getting straight to the point. They start with a main idea, they put it in the beginning of their text, and after that they explain what do they mean, they show the facts, they add the evidence, they use hard numbers and so on. The Gallic style, on the opposite, is tending to prefer to put explanations in the beginning, and they are expressed in a rhetorical, very beautiful way, and then they lead to a conclusion. Teutonic style is mostly like it, though they also put the explanations at the beginning, though the way they use to explain them is deduction, meaning logical way. And there is a Nippon style, which is nothing like any of them. So you can see that if you're using the style which is native to one type of culture to the other one, they might find your argumentation, which is presented in your text, maybe not so convincing, or too bold, or even rude in some cases, just because you are presenting the same information in a different way. All of that might be a little overwhelming. I mean, there are so many cultures, and looking for keys for each one, it takes time, it takes resources. So there is a way to make it easier, not easy though, is to culturalize not for each country separately, but for the groups of them. There are different ways of making culture groups. Here on the slide, you see colored bubbles. And each colored bubble represents the group which we usually use when we try to kind of separate the cultures intuitively. For example, Catholic Europe, English-speaking, Orthodox Europe, Latin America, and so on. There, the cultures are placed based on a graph of 2 dimensions, so it's a mapping which is used to present them. And if you can see, there are 2 circles which are circling some cultures. In the red one, which is lower, there are 2 dots which are United States and Belgium. And they're really close to each other. Like, really. They're actually closer to each other than to other members of their respected groups. Which means that, based on that mapping, United States and Belgium might benefit from having the same style of communication, might benefit from having the same screenshots and so on, if something is optimizing for Belgium, specifically. So, yeah, there is that. Moving on to the more practical part of the presentation, how to do it. There is a process of 4 steps I use in Prequel not to get lost while trying to identify the most promising values. And the first step of it is to choose value which is applicable to my product. This is the value which I want to address in my communication, which I want to express so the users will connect with my product and so on. This value generally is connected with the pains and needs, with your interviews and customer personas, and so on. For Prequel, for example, Prequel is a photo editing app, so it might be the need to belong, the need to show your status of a way, the need to get more likes or social media, which I kind of grouped in a value of status. The second step is to find a model which helps me to reasonably measure the different attitude towards that value. For example, in this case, I took 2 dimensions from Hofstede model, and I created a map, like the one you just saw, just creating a graph, because each of the cultures had the number for the dimension. And after that, the cultures kind of clustered in 4 meaningful clusters. Each of those clusters represented some attitude towards the value I was interested in. However, that leaves us on the very theoretical, very high level. So the third step I want to take this knowledge and apply it to the context of what I'm actually doing. So I'm doing ASO. I'm doing ASO for a photo editing app. So the best way to communicate with user is probably through visuals, meaning screenshots. And my audience is young young, quite young, depends, and they are based in particular countries. So, knowing that, I can come up with some hypotheses. And in this case, I have two of them. The first one is that cultures with high power distance might be interested in seeing that prequel can help them to express the way their status through the social media and so on. The second hypothesis was that I shouldn't use this type of communication for Nordic countries at all, because they are low power distance cultures, they're feminine cultures, and they do not care about showing status that much. Therefore, I should find another value, another way to show them that the prequel is exactly the app they are looking for. And coming to an end of this talk, I would like to show you some cases of how exactly all that knowledge was applied, and also give you some ideas you can take away with you to start testing and start culturalizing. So the first case is the case where we use the knowledge about high difference between high and low context. So as you can see, there are two screenshots. The one which is white, it's for United States. And even though it's still quite colorful, because it's a photo editing app, that's what we do, which is our niche. It's less colorful, it's less busy than the one for the high context culture. On the low context culture screenshot, American, the white one, it's easier to read the text there, and the messaging is clear and straight to the point. The call to action is clearly communicated, and those two screenshots, they show the same feature but in a different way. The second case wasn't a success, which is what's happening if you're doing an ASO in the majority of cases. And what I believe had happened here is that we kind of broke one of the main rules of the culturalization, which we recognized too late. And that main rule is when you are doing culturalization, you want to access the image your audience has about themselves, not the one you have about them. And it can be really confusing because we're all humans. So here I feel we didn't address the right value, and therefore it didn't work right, though it's also a knowledge. There is no failed test. So I just will use it as an example for you to always try to think back if you are not too relying too heavy on the image on your head. And to finish, some ideas for you to take away. The first one is also based on stereotypes, though on the good stereotypes. The thing is, each culture has some image of itself, which also has like a good part of it, good parts in it. And what we can do, if your company, if your app, if your game can reasonably claim that you are coming from some country, you can use it to show to other people, to other cultures, to communicate some value. For example, it would be French fashion for a style advancing app, or German quality for a highly technological AI-based app, or Japanese game, or so on. Here I have an example which is taken from the big physical marketing, because I really struggled to find something on the App Store which is doing exactly that, so you may take it as a new idea if you haven't tried it yet. The second idea for the test is to change the way your information is presented. People living in the different parts of the world, they see things differently, and you can change the colors, the texts, and your visuals to communicate in their cultural language, which is more than their language. And finally, use the possibility to reflect the reality of your users, the things which are around them, because the main goal of the marketing is for the users to recognize themselves, to connect with that image you are selling, because it's something they desire. And that might be easier if there is something you can claim, you can show to them as being part of their own culture. Obviously, all what I've just said is not limited for ASO-only use. You can also use it for product optimization, for showing the perfect features for your users. You can use it for your advertisements optimization, culturalization, to making them more targeted. And I find it really exciting. It's like the whole new world is opening, just as Davron has said. And therefore, if you have any questions, come ask them, any questions to ask, or any cases to share, or any problems you want to discuss in terms of why something is not working. I mean, I spent like a couple of years digging in all these cultural articles and books and stuff, so I will be really happy to share that. Because let's culturalize together. And thank you very much for your attention.